This is Watukobese again, and today I'm going to be touching on bishops of opposite color. Now, if you remember, I talked about the advantage of the two bishops and why the two bishops are an advantage. And we said that first of all, obviously, if you have the two bishops, you're going to try and open up the position and you're going to try and use both of them and so on and so on and so on. But the other advantage that you are having when you have the two bishops is that you can choose to exchange one of the bishops to reach either bishops of this, a position of where you have bishops of the same color on the board, or bishops of opposite color, or you are playing bishop against knight. Okay, so having the two bishops gives you that advantage of having this luxury of always trading into one of those positions. Now, today we're going to be talking about bishops of opposite color, and mainly what you do when you have the position is of bishops of opposite color. The first thing that we have to understand is that there's a high tendency of a draw happening. Okay, when we have these bishops of opposite color, in many end games, it's going to be drawn. And I wanted us to talk about a position, a theoretical position, first of all, and just to see how difficult it is for white to make progress, even if white is 2 pawns up. Okay, let's get to it. We're going to look at this position right here. And here we see that white is trying to obviously queen one of these pawns, but it's not actually possible to make progress here because the rule is that, you see, these 2 pawns here, if the pawns are on the 4th rank, right, as they are here, first prize for black to hold this position is to put the bishop on this square on c6 and the king here on e6. If black would be able to put the bishop on c6 and the king on e6, this position would be a draw. For a simple reason that should white push the pawn and say check, black can sacrifice the bishop and take both pawns. And if white tries to come around with the king to c4, the bishop would take the pawn on e4. Right. If this is not easily achievable, then black will have to try and set up the next barrier on the 7th rank. That means now we have to imagine that these pawns push, the one pawn is on d5 and the other pawn is on e5. So the pawns are going to be here. Then if the pawns are here, black will have to have the bishop attacking one of the pawns. So the bishop must be here on f7 and the king must be there on d7. Then that would also be a draw. Yeah, based on the same reasoning that white cannot push the pawn e6 and defend the pawn d5 at the same time. If white tries to go around with the king, black just takes the pawn. Okay, you can try and set this up and see how this would happen. So we are just going to look at a theoretical point of view and try to see this theoretical position, how black should play. So the move that is recommended here is to play bishop to c4. The immediate idea that black has is to try and put the bishop on f7 and the king on d7 and then try to wait for these pawns to come forward and set up that drawing position. If black plays the move bishop b5, okay, bishop b5 is not the right move. We're going to see why. Because if you play bishop b5, you want to put the bishop on c6 and the king on e6, but black doesn't have time because white plays bishop b4 check. Now let us see what the problem is if white plays here king e6. Now white would be fine if white could play the move bishop c6, it would be a draw. Black, excuse me. If black could play the move bishop c6, it would be a draw. But unfortunately, black doesn't have the time. White plays d5 check. And if black tries to block the pawns with king e5, comes bishop c3 check, king d6, now king d4. Now we can see that immediately the problem is that e5 check is coming, and after e5 check, e6. Because once e6 happens, then your king will be on a black square, and the bishop is going to drive the king away from the black square again. So for example, bishop e8, e5 check, king e7, e6, and white is winning. Because the bishop is coming to check you on b4, and the king will proceed and go around to support the move d7, and you will lose. Right. So let's go back to this position here and say, we said bishop c4 is the correct move, but let's look at another variation after bishop b5 check, bishop b4 check. So we looked at the move king e6, and we saw why king e6 is losing. Let us now focus on the move king c7. Okay, king c7 is the same problem, d5, e5. Now black is late again, because black would like to play two moves in this position. Black would like to put the king on d7 and the bishop on f7 to reach a draw, but it's not possible because black cannot play two moves at the same time. So black plays, let's say, bishop f7, now comes e6, and again black is losing. So what does it mean? It means then that in the initial position, black has to immediately understand that it's not possible to set up the bishop on c6 and the king on e6. So we should immediately try to set up that position with the bishop f7, king d7. So, okay, that's why bishop c4 is the best move. Bishop g3 check, king goes to c6. We have to be careful that you don't block your bishop. If you play king e6, this is not a good move, because now the bishop cannot go back to f7. The king comes around, king d2, king c3, and here a waiting move. The king must move. If the king moves, then we move d5. We don't want to play d5 now, because you will take, bishop takes a pawn. So let's say bishop b1, and now comes check and e5, and again the position is lost. We will come with king d4, we'll play e6, king e5, d6 check, and with a winning position. That is why after bishop g3 check, we have to play king c6, not blocking the bishop. King f4, bishop back to g8. Now we're waiting, king there. Now we've set up this position, right? We were waiting for these pawns. Now white plays d5. Okay, you have to be a little bit careful, because maybe white can play king f6 followed by king g7, trapping your bishop. So bishop h7 is a very good move, because it doesn't allow king f6, because the pawn on e4 is hanging. King f4, bishop g6, and only after e5. So we stay with the pawn. We keep attacking the pawn because the king cannot move. And only after e5 do we play bishop f7. Now it's a draw. King e4, bishop g8, and we see white cannot make progress because white cannot push the pawn to e6 check. So this is a theoretical draw. This shows you why it is difficult to win with the bishops of opposite color, even if you have two pawns in the endgame. We are now going to look at another endgame position with bishops of opposite color, but this time it's going to be there's going to be a difference in that we are going to see a game where one side was able to attack. Now we are going. Now we get into the important part. You see, the rule is that in a position where there are bishops of opposite color, the side that has an advantage is the side that is able to have the initiative. It is the side that is able to attack the king. If you can set up a situation where you can be able to attack the king, then you have an advantage. This is easy to understand because if you have, say, a black bishop and a rook, you are attacking on the black squares, and the opponent has got a white squared bishop. It's difficult for the opponent to defend the black squares because the bishop is white. That is why when one side has got the initiative, normally it is a big advantage. Okay, let us look at an example here. We're going to jump in this game to move 24. This was a very nice game. It was played by Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer was playing white, and he was playing against Forintos. And this was played in Monte Carlo in 1967. So we're going to see what happened in this position. All right, let's get into it. So here we see that at the moment, Forintos has got the 2 bishops, but it's clear that there's going to be an exchange. The knight on h5 is going to exchange the bishop, and then we're going to have bishops of opposite color on the board. Now, Fischer was an amazing player, so he already could foresee that in reaching this position, he's going to actually reach a position where he's going to have bishops of opposite color in the end game, and is going to be able to attack. So, Forintos plays queen takes d1, rook takes d1, and the bishop is attacking the rook, so he plays rook f d8, fighting for control of the d file. Right, Fischer plays knight takes f6 check, and Forintos plays g takes f6. So immediately we see that it is an endgame of bishops of opposite color. This bishop here is on a black square, it controls black squares, and this bishop is on a white square, and it controls white squares. So indeed, bishops of opposite color. Right. Now the question becomes, why did Fischer go into this position? What was he hoping to get? The answer is very simple. The black king on g8 is very weak, and this bishop is holding f8. It actually means that the king is in a box, right? Because the king cannot get out. And so we are going to try and attack this king. Fischer is going to try and harass the opponent's king. So now immediately you see that that example I was talking about, where I said that bishops of opposite color favor the side with the initiative. Okay, so Fischer plays rook takes d8 check, rook takes d8, and then he plays the move bishop e7, attacking the pawn on f6. Okay, the opponent plays rook e4, rook d4, attacking the pawn on e4, rook e3, and look at this interesting position. If you pay attention, you will see that actually Fischer is threatening checkmate. For an example, if the opponent is not careful and takes on e4 with the rook, he would play rook g3 check, and after king h8, bishop takes f6 is checkmate, right? So we immediately see the dangers. Look at this attack. It's on the black squares, and the white squared bishop is a spectator. Black's white squared bishop. So that is why in this position after rook e3, Forintos plays bishop takes e4, so that he's able to cover his king with the bishop. But now we're going to see that there are other problems that are coming, which is what? The back rank. So Fischer plays bishop takes f6. Now notice that the two kings, the difference between the two kings is like night and day. The black king is really feeling the pressure. Because imagine if the rook is able to give check, let's say here it's checkmate. The back rank is very weak. The white king can go to h2 and nothing is happening. So the opponent tries to run out, of course, of this box with king f8. Fischer plays a3, bishop c6, and now rook takes e5. Yeah, he's trying to box the king in. Yeah, the king is nicely boxed in. There is already a big threat here. For example, let us say black ignores everything and plays the move a5, for an example, which he did not play. Fischer would play the move bishop e7 check. Now, if you go to e8, there is bishop c5 check and the rook is lost. And if black moves to g7, you know, rook g5 check is a problem. And if you go back, there is mate. And if you play a move like, let's say, king h6, we can see then that the king is starting to be yeah, to be not so comfortable, to say the least. Yeah, maybe white will come with the king, h2, and try to push to defend the rook. Yeah, g3, h4 when the king is here, and then already bishop f8 would be mate. So it's a very difficult position for black. So that's why he plays rook d5. He's trying to offer an exchange of rooks. Of course, Fischer will not take the rook. If Fischer takes the rook here, it's a draw. Yeah, that white is a pawn up will not matter, because as we've seen in an endgame, a pure endgame of bishops of opposite color, it's even sometimes 2 pawns are not enough to win. So Fischer plays rook e3, rook f5, bishop e5, h5, f3. Now he's going to try and play the move g4, so that you know, the rook is a little bit out of the game. King f2, g4, rook g5, and bishop f6. Notice that the king is still in a mating net. So all he has to do is defend this bishop and swing the rook either this way or that way, and it will be mate. Rook d5, f4. After rook d2, he plays the move f5. Yeah. So now the threat is, yeah, maybe something like rook c3 is also a problem. He plays bishop d5, king g5, hiding the king, rook d1, rook c3, threatening rook c8 checkmate. Plays rook e1. Now the idea of rook e1 is that if you play check, I can block with the rook. Now Fischer plays rook h3. The threat is mate. Rook king goes to e8, and now finally he plays this beautiful move, rook d3, and Forintos resigns because he cannot defend the bishop, and should the bishop move, there is rook d8 checkmate coming. So we saw a very nice game which illustrates nicely that if you see that the position is going to go to a bishops of opposite color, you need to make sure that you are the one who has the initiative, so that you can attack the opponent's king. The next game we're going to look at, still on the topic of bishops of opposite color, is a fantastic game. This game was played by Alexander Kotov against Mikhail Botvinnik. It was played in the Soviet Championship in 1939. And we will see this game, how Botvinnik you know, moves the position to a bishops of opposite color middle game. And the rule is still the same. Whoever manages to launch an attack first, whoever manages to grab the initiative, attack the opponent's king, is going to have an advantage. Yeah, pretty big advantage when there are bishops of opposite color on the board. Okay, without any further ado, let us go into the game. Kotov played d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, Nimzo Indian. Queen c2, this is the so-called classical variation. The idea of queen c2 is that white wants to play a3, and after taking, he wants to take back with the queen, so that his pawn structure is intact. Botvinnik plays knight c6. There are many moves to play here. Knight c6 puts pressure on the pawn on d4. Knight f3, d5, still putting more pressure on the pawn on d4, using the queen now. Yeah? Now we have queen attacking via x-ray through the pawn, attacking d4. Kotov plays e3, castles. Botvinnik plays a3. Yeah, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. This is normal in a Nimzo Indian, that black gives the bishop. White has got the two bishops, and the question though is, you know, why is this playable for black? The answer is very simple. Yeah, white has got two bishops, but there are a number of issues that white still has to solve as well. You know, the bishop on c1 is not as happy as all that, because he's got two pawns that are, sort of blocking him. He's got the pawn on e3 and the pawn on d4. And yeah, white has to try and maybe move the pawn e4, but this is not easy to achieve. So yeah, white should be better here, but the position is playable, of course, for black. Okay, Botvinnik plays bishop d7. Kotov plays b3. And now Botvinnik plays the move a5. We're going to see what the idea is of this move a5. Right? Okay. Kotov plays bishop d3, and now Botvinnik plays a4. Now it becomes interesting. What is Botvinnik playing for? And the answer is that Botvinnik is playing against Kotov's good bishop. So if you look at the two bishops, we said that the black squared bishop is Kotov's worst piece. Not worse as in the weakest piece, but it's weaker than the other bishop. No? So what Botvinnik would like to do is to get a situation where he can exchange his white squared bishop for Kotov's bishop on d3. Let us make an example, just as an example. Let us, for example, imagine that Kotov played here b4 and see what Botvinnik's idea would be. Now, take a look at the pawns that have moved, by white's pawns that have moved. We see a3. Let me highlight them, yeah? a3, b4, okay, c4, but I won't highlight c4, d4, e3. Yeah? These pawns are pawns that white has moved. They are all on black squares. So this is a strategy that you also have to adopt in your games. The opponent moves pawns, or you just see a position and you say, well, what's happening in this position? Sometimes it helps to look at the pawns. Which pawns have moved? Are these pawns, are the majority of the pawns on white squares? Are the majority of the pawns on black squares? This helps. So in this position, the majority of the pawns that have moved are on black squares, which means what? Which means that the black squared bishop is not happy. So for example, in such a position, of course, Botvinnik would want to trade the bishop. So we would expect a move like, let us say, d takes c4, and if bishop takes c4, knight a7. Yeah. So the idea of knight a7 is that, for example, if after castling, he would play the move bishop b5, and there we already see that he's going to trade the white squared bishop, and then he's going to try and hold the pawn from moving. Yeah, maybe let's just make some moves. Let's say bishop b2. Yeah, because I want to play queen d5. I want to put this queen on d5, but maybe c7 hangs. Maybe c6. Yeah, it doesn't look so nice. But okay, it's just a variation I want to illustrate. And play, let's say, queen d5. Up. Queen d5. Yeah. So, for an example, if we reach a position like this, we immediately see that this bishop is it's in a very unfortunate position because it's locked in behind its pawns. And the white squares are quite weak, and black would have a nice position here, and would be able to convert this. Right. So immediately then, after the move a4, Kotov obviously understands what is happening. He plays the move knight d2. Right. Which brings us to something else that is very important in chess, which is, when the opponent moves a piece, it is very important that you also look at this piece, where the piece was. Because remember, in chess, your pieces are soldiers, and all your pieces have got specific functions that they have in a position. So once a piece is a move is made, there is something that is lost. You know, Bobby Fischer made a quote and said, in order to get squares, you have to give squares, right? Because in order to get squares, you must use pieces. But when you use pieces, you give the squares where the pieces were previously attacking. So it's also a very good theory, or rather a tool to use in your own games. You see the opponent playing a move. Sometimes, yes, you have to concentrate on the threat, but sometimes you also think, where was this piece? What was it doing there? What is it not doing now? Sometimes it can help you to unlock some important secrets about a position, no? So the knight goes to d2. Now we immediately notice that the knight is no longer controlling the square e5 in the center. Because when the knight was on f3, it was controlling e5. So now, since it is now no longer on f3, Botvinnik plays the move rook e8, immediately taking advantage of the fact that the knight has moved away. So the opponent castles and immediately he plays e5, hitting the center. Opponent captures, knight captures, and bishop b2. This becomes now a very interesting position because we see that Botvinnik has got the first chance to play knight takes d3 in this position, but he doesn't, because he doesn't want to play knight takes d3, queen takes d3, and remember what we said. When this position is reached, it would be bishops of opposite color. But the question is, who's got the better chance of attacking the king? I would say white. Because next, white will play the move queen d4 or queen c3. Yeah? Setting up some kind of a battery here with queen in front of the bishop. And then moving out rook. You know, the black squares are going to be very difficult. Let me make an illustration. Let me make just one move here. It doesn't matter what. Let's say here, just an example. Let's say queen c3. Now you see that how difficult it is to defend these black squares. Really, if you took a moment and looked at this diagonal, you will see that it's very difficult to oppose that diagonal for black. You know, white is got a very strong pressure down that diagonal. So obviously, Botvinnik is worried a little bit about this. That's why here he plays first a takes b3. After knight takes b3, he plays knight e4. He's obviously calculated this. The opponent plays queen c2, and now he takes on c4, pawn takes, and now, only now does he play queen g5. Notice now the change in the position. He plays queen g5, and now he is the one who has the chances to attack first. Let us look at the opponent. Kotov played f4. No, the question is, what if Kotov takes the pawn on c7? We are going to discuss later, you know, on the topic of tactics in chess, how you would calculate a position like that. But what you do, I'm just going to give you a little preview before we get there. You would look at the so-called patterns. No? Now a pattern, for example here, what patterns are there? So the first pattern we would see is that the queen is pinning the pawn on g2. The next pattern we see is that the knight on b3 is hanging. The bishop on b2 is hanging. Hanging meaning it's not protected. So yeah, maybe we would play bishop h3, trying to use both these patterns together. Threatening mate, so g3. And maybe now we can use this pattern, play queen maybe d5 to attack the knight, and at the same time maybe we make some kind of a threat to move the knight and checkmate on g2. But either way, you know, we see that it's a very dangerous position for white, which explains why Kotov decided to play the move f4. Unfortunately, f4 weakens the square e4. Yeah, a weak square, remember, is a square that cannot be protected by a pawn. So e4 becomes weak. Botvinnik plays queen c6. Rook fd1, knight d6. Botvinnik wants to put his bishop on e4 so that he can establish an aggressive and attacking position, yeah, with bishop and queen. Bishop f5, after queen c3, bishop e4. Kotov has also managed to set up something, but it's too late. You know, his pieces are more on the queen side. Botvinnik's pieces are attacking on the king side. Rook d2, bishop c6. He's threatening knight e4, queen d3, knight f5. And here we'll go quickly past these moves. I'm just going to play them so that you see the moves. But generally, white is in big trouble. And notice how in the position, take a look at the difference between the two bishops. Take a look at black's bishop on c6 and look at white's bishop on c7. The bishop on c7 is a spectator. You know, he's not participating in the position at all. Bishops of opposite color, the advantage goes to the first side that attacks. Okay, so king h8, bishop b6, okay, h5, it's, you know, he's launching an attack, and it's very difficult for Kotov to defend. You know, there are just threats everywhere, and after here, he resigned. Yeah, so a very nice game that illustrates the whole idea of, if you're going to make a transition to a position of bishops of opposite color, make sure that you are the one who's going to have the initiative and you are going to be able to attack first. Right, the next game we're going to look at now is still on the topic of bishops of opposite color. And the funny thing is that it's still between the same two opponents who played in that game we looked at in the 30s. It's the same opponents, Kotov versus Mikhail Botvinnik. And this time they played in 1955 in another Soviet championship. And Kotov had white and Botvinnik had black. Let's go into the game. d4, d5, c4, c6. This is the so-called Slav variation. And you see the thing about the move c6, there are two purposes. The one is to support the pawn on d5. And the other one, now I hope that you are now at such a stage where you are paying close attention to pawns on the same squares, right? Where you are able to see that if a pawn is on e5 and d6, they're on black squares, they influence the bishop. If you see, for example, here, d5, c6, b7, they're on white squares, the white squared bishop. Right. The idea is actually here to liberate this bishop. And let's see how. Okay, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, e6. These are typical moves of the Slav. e3, knight d7, bishop d3. So Botvinnik played bishop b4. That's another variation. But one of the ideas of a Slav is to play here d takes c4. Because before that, look at all these pawns. Look at the pawn on b7, the pawn on c6, the pawn on d5, and the pawn on e6. The white squared bishop is not going anywhere. It's blocked right in. But actually, in this position, it is possible for black to free this bishop. And that is the whole idea of the Slav. So, for an example, let's say black plays d takes c4, bishop takes c4. Now black plays b5. Bishop goes back, and now black plays bishop b7. What is the idea? Well, let's say, for example, white castles. Now black plays the move a6. And now all of a sudden, I'll just make a move here. Black will play the move c5. Look at that. And now all of a sudden, the bishop that was giving problems is now the star of the position. On b7, the bishop is attacking two squares in the center and is controlling that a8 to h1 diagonal. So that is the one of the ideas of the Slav. Okay, but in this game, Botvinnik played the move bishop b4, castles, bishop d2, You see, it's a very interesting sort of side step, because once black plays bishop b4 and then back to d6, black is actually arguing that the bishop is not so good on d2. Yeah, it also blocks the queen, the influence of the queen on the in the center. All right. Kotov plays the move b3. Queen goes to e7. Let's talk about the move b3. Remember, when Kotov plays b3, he's playing against that bishop, right? So that should Botvinnik take on c4, he would be able to take back with the pawn. And this time, that bishop is not getting out, you see? And yeah, here he's got a very strong center. So yeah, it's playable, but it's better for white. So queen e7. Botvinnik now wants to play the move e5. He's trying to put his pieces in such a position that he can play the move e5. e5 would liberate his c8 bishop, no? Of course. Kotov plays queen c2. Now he plays e5. C takes d5. C takes d5. This is a very good capture. Notice here, you know, this is like, if you look at games by very strong players, grandmasters and world champions, you will see that there is timing. Timing is important. What does this mean? It means you don't just exchange at any given time. You wait till the situation favors you before you exchange. If you look at this position here, if white exchanges on d5 and black takes back, there's an important technique that you use in order for you to understand and be able to visualize if the position that will come is actually good or not so good for you. Or rather, who does this exchange favor? No? So you would say to yourself, well, before you take, of course, if I take on d5, who does the exchange favor? And let us look at the position. C takes d5, E takes d5. Right, what does it mean? What are the changes? The pawn that was on e6 is no longer there. So it means that the bishop can get into the game. One. Number two, the e file is now available for black's pieces, most especially the rooks. And then there is something that we'll touch upon later that Nimzovich talked about, which is called the advanced outpost. That means the pawn on d5, e4. Later on, the black will be able to play the move knight e4 and maybe knight d to f6 using that advanced outpost. So all in all, this exchange on d5 would favor the opponent. Good. So let us look first. Kotov plays queen c2, and only after e5 does Kotov take on d5. What's the difference? Well, the difference is that e5, of course, is a move that white cannot stop because it's in black's territory. Remember, the chessboard is divided into two important territories. First rank to the fourth rank is white's territory. Fifth rank to the eighth rank is black's territory. It's very difficult to stop the opponent from maneuvering in their own territory. So after e5, white playing c takes d5, c takes d5, we see immediately that white has created a weak pawn on d5. Yeah, right. But okay, such a position is not that easy to, you know, it's difficult to say we can explain this position that easily, because many games have been played and it's a very theoretical position. Actually, it was discovered later that in this position, white should play the move e4. And such a move guarantees white a small advantage. If black plays e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, attacking the pawn on h7. Okay? Just out of interest, go and look at the games of the World Chess Championship that was played between Vishwanathan Anand and Boris Gelfand. And at some point they discussed a position like this. Not the exact position, but it was a similar position where the pawns, you know, it was a Slav, and I think they discussed 2 or 3 games in this position. Then you will see the ideas. Yeah, it's not so easy for black. Yeah, white is slightly better. But okay, this was discovered later. Now we come to a very interesting part of the game. Because, you see, here, we will try and sort of get into Kotov's mind and try to figure out what he's thinking about. He plays here, d takes e5, and after knight takes e5, he plays the move knight d4. An interesting decision, offering Botvinnik one of the bishops, the bishop on d3. So the question is why? The answer is, we're still going to, remember we're talking now, the topic is about bishops of opposite color. We're still going to get to another topic where we're going to talk about how to play against two bishops. We're going to get to that. But this now is where you see like snippets of this idea. The idea is that if you want to play against two bishops, your knight must have a very good square in the center. Yeah. If you remember the game that we looked at between English and Steinitz, where Steinitz was fighting to stop English's knight from getting into the center. Remember, Steinitz played moves like b6 and then c5 when English's knight was on b3 and English's bishop was on e3. Yeah, taking advantage of that d4 square, preventing the knight from getting into the center. So one of the ways that you fight against two bishops is that you have an outpost. You put your knight on an outpost, and the best outpost is the one where you're blockading an isolated pawn. This is already the case here. Notice that the knight on d4 is blockading the isolated pawn on d5. What does this mean? This means that, let us fast forward a little bit so that it becomes clearer, because Botvinnik takes in this position. If the position stays as is, okay, this knight makes one of the bishops bad. Which bishop do you think it is? Well, of course, it's the white squared bishop, because notice that this pawn on d5 is blocking this bishop on c8. Okay? So it means that, for an example, if you put the bishop on b7, it cannot be activated towards the king side. And in other positions as well, this bishop is going to have some problems. So this is what Kotov is playing against. Now, Botvinnik, of course, saw this position, but he plays now a very powerful idea. I really am fond of this game. I'm fond of the thinking behind Botvinnik's moves. I think it is very deep, and it's very easy to miss this. Botvinnik decides already. Okay, first before I jump, let's stay on what would happen if Botvinnik doesn't do anything. You see, Kotov will try to exchange his dark squared bishop with Botvinnik's strong bishop on d6. If you were to imagine that white could exchange these bishops, then white has a very good position, and white can try to play for a win in that position. So Botvinnik notices that this position could be dangerous for him, and he needs obviously a plan of how to continue in this position. He comes up with a very nice idea. He already sees the idea that if he would exchange this knight, no? If he would exchange this bishop for this knight, he would immediately reach a position of bishops of opposite color. Okay, because this knight is quite strong. So now the question though is when and under which circumstances must he exchange this knight? Well, the answer is very simple. He must exchange that knight when he would be able to attack white's king. So he sets this up. He plays queen e5. This is a very nice move. Queen e5, of course, threatens mate. This is clear. Now, if Kotov plays the move knight f3, Botvinnik would play queen h5, and immediately we are seeing that there is indeed a big attack on Kotov's king. You know, bishop g4 is coming, rook e8, and so on and so on and so on with an attack. So Kotov plays the move f4. Yes, it's an unfortunate move from a positional point of view because it makes e4 weak, and it also weakens the e3 pawn. But on the other hand, remember that Kotov is thinking, okay, my knight actually becomes secured on d4. Botvinnik plays queen e7, rook c1, so they develop by moving their pieces towards the center. Rook f d8, rook c2, and now Botvinnik plays bishop c5. That's excellent move. After knight a4, he exchanges by taking the knight. If Kotov had taken with the pawn here, Botvinnik will play the move g6 and bishop f5 is coming, yeah? So, Kotov takes with the queen, bishop f5. Now, can you see the idea? The bishop is going to go to e4. It reminds us of the earlier game between the two, where Botvinnik also managed to get the bishop to e4, yeah? Bishop b4, queen d7, knight e4. Well, why knight e4? Very simple. Knight e4, we don't want to put the bishop yet, because if you put the bishop on e4, the knight will come back to c3 and exchange the bishop. So he wants to exchange the knights first and then put the bishop on e4. So that's why after rook c1, he plays the move b6, stopping the knight from coming to c5. Rook f d1, f6, a very strong move, because first of all, he is closing this diagonal here, because remember that diagonal is the one that white wants to use, because white is having a black squared bishop, right? And at the same time, he is opening up a path, no, for his queen towards the king side, yeah, where he will then be able to attack, because remember, it is bishops of opposite color. The opponent plays knight c3, we exchange, he exchanges the knights and plays the move bishop e4. Now he's ready to set up an attack, yeah. Yeah, this game goes all the way to the end game, and at some point we are going to discuss that end game. It's a very important end game, and but I'm just going to go through the game pretty quickly so that you can replay it, just to see what happened. Yeah, the whole game was actually about the creation of an attacking position, more pieces. You see, it's still about this important piece. Yeah, they reached an end game, but as I said, this end game, we're going to deal with it much later. Yeah, for now, it was just important for us. Yeah, let me show you just quickly how he won the game. He's going to win the game by creating two distant pass pawns. Yeah, this is an excellent move, very good move. So he takes here, and then he plays the move d4 check. He's creating two pawns because he's going to win the pawn on h4. Okay, the rule in the bishop of opposite color in the end game is that you are going to win if there are 3 files between your pass pawns. You need 3 files. So for an example, if your pawn is on b, 1, 2, 3, you need to have a pawn on the f file. If the pawn is on the e file, the win is not that easy. It's a little bit complicated. But of course, now we see that Botvinnik is winning easily because he's created so many files between his pawns. So the king must guard this pawn, then the king will go over and win the bishop, and then he will come back and win with the pawn. So a very nice game, and we saw a number of things in this game, and it's just very important to be mindful of. If I was to make a very quick recap, I would say the first one was the fact that Kotov makes a plan in a sense that he wants to fight against the two bishops. He puts a knight on d4, cements this knight, and so we see snippets of how to play against two bishops. Your knight must go to an outpost and ideally blockade an isolated pawn. Then Botvinnik sees the position and decides that he's going to change the position to position of bishops of opposite color. But first he makes sure that the conditions are correct, are proper for this position. He forces Kotov to make this weakness of f4, yeah? And then afterwards he exchanges the knight on d4, and before he moves the bishop to e4, he puts the knight on e4 so that he could exchange with Kotov's knight on a4. And after this exchange, the bishop then, Kotov was a very strong player, he still defended, but Botvinnik was always in the driving seat, and he was always the one who was playing for the win.